Well, our first story features Julie and Jeremy. Julie is Jeremy's birth mother, who she gave up for adoption when she was 16 years old. And Julie and Jeremy, I'm so glad that you're with us today here on See Here Love because I'm so interested and excited to hear your story, Jeremy, about your story of being adopted and identity, and Julie, your story as a birth mother. So, Julie, why don't you fill in the gaps a little bit about the story and how this all came to be for you to give up Jeremy for adoption?
Well, I'd always considered myself pro life growing up. I grew up in a Christian home, and I would even argue in class about on the pro life side, but you honestly never really know what you're going to choose until you're in those shoes. And when I found out that I was pregnant, I was absolutely terrified. I was 15 when I found out I was pregnant. I was so scared. And like immediately I thought, yeah, I will, like, I'll relinquish for adoption, I'll carry to term. But the enemy has such a way of getting into your head. And I just heard a lot of condemnation from him and what are people going to think and judgment. And I began to get really scared. And as time went on, I thought, no, I can't do this. And I actually did book an abortion. And it was the Sunday before the abortion was to happen that I was at church. And the pastor spoke about how no matter what you decide, God will be with you every step of the way, no matter what you do, and if you walk in obedience with him, he'll be with you. And so I actually, in that moment, I cried through the whole service and I changed my mind and decided that I would carry to term and that I would connect with a Christian adoption agency. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Wow. Jeremy, when you hear that about Julie making that decision to carry to term and have you, how does that make you feel?
Pretty incredible. The first time I actually heard about that, we were doing another interview a couple months after we met. And I learned in that interview, like she said the exact same thing. And I was sitting off on the sidelines, just jaw like on the floor. I had no idea that like I was that close to not being here. So it like really fills me with a lot of gratitude.
Yeah. Jeremy, I feel the same way. When I met my birth mother, that was the one thing I said to her was thank you. Thank you for carrying me to term and thank you for making that very hard choice. And so, yeah, I hear you that it's like I am here because of the choices that you made. And choices matter. Choices matter a lot, especially when it comes to the decisions that we make in this way. So, Jeremy, you are adopted. I want to hear about your story. This show is about, identity and belonging as an adopted kid. It's sort of the spotlight and highlight on kids that were adopted. So tell me at what age you found out you're adopted and what was sort of the process of you growing up knowing that you were adopted?
I don't remember a time that I didn't know. It was very important to Julie when I was adopted that I always knew, and it wasn't some big secret that I found out later on in my life. So I'd always known kind of that's where I came from. And to me, it was almost a cool story. It didn't as much seem reality because I was so out of touch with it. But I was always told that I looked like my parents as well, which again was another one of Julie's plans. She wanted me to be with people who I would try to fit in with, and I didn't feel so out of place. So that was kind of neat as well. But it was always, yeah, always a cool story in the background when I was a child.
Hmm. So, were you at all, when people found out, was there any bullying or anything that made you feel like, oh, wait, ooh, I don't belong, or maybe I was unwanted, or any of those kinds of feelings that you might have experienced?
Personally, no. I was raised to be very confident and also just my personality. So when, if anyone ever did try to make fun of me, I would say, well, I was chosen.
Yes.
And that would kind of shut
Yes.
everything down.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I would say. And it was actually really bad because when my sister and brother and I would get into a fight, Jeremy, we would fight. And I have two older brothers and sisters that are their like biological children, my parents. And then my dad and mom remember this. I would stand up like 6 years old, little Melinda, and be like, well, I just have to tell you something. If you're going to be mad at me, mom and dad had to have you, but they chose me. And that would shut down the conversation right away. It was like a one up, but that's so good. That's so healthy, that chosen piece. I want you to talk a little bit about that because I know for kids that have been adopted, that chosen piece can be something good or something like not so great. Why is that's so meaningful and good for you that you were chosen? I think that's important as far as identity as well.
It's, I don't know how far things are rooted personally, since like I was a baby. They say the most fundamental years are your first few years, but part of it was probably just in wanting to be, or needing to be wanted rather, and just yeah, having like your chosen family.
Yeah, no, I love that. Julie, for you, just the process of giving up your child for adoption. What was that for you? And I think it's good to hear from a birth mother about that whole experience of that, and then the years ahead. Like my mother, who prayed for me every day that I would be okay. What was your experience after you gave up, Jeremy?
It was it was very hard. I had always wanted to be a mom, and he was my firstborn, but I knew that God was calling me to do that. And so I had confidence in my decision. I actually never regretted my decision, um, but I cried a lot. He was born in June, and June was a really, really hard month for me every single year. And I prayed for him a lot. There were no open adoptions back then, but I did request permission to write letters. And so I did actually write every year on his birthday. So I think that was part of the healing process for me, just that I knew my job was to just let him know how much I loved him. Even if I never heard anything back, I just wanted to communicate that to him.
Mm. Now you were reunited 3 years ago. Is that right? About 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, Jeremy. What was the need or desire to reunite with Julie and Julie for you, the experience? But Jeremy, let's start with you. Why and what was that like?
Um, I'd always wanted to, ever since I was a child, I'd always expressed to my parents that I wanted to, I guess, find out where I came from. And I didn't know how far that was going to go, if I just wanted to meet and find out the basic questions of like health history and biological history, or if I, really wanted to get to know the person. But that was kind of what I'd find out at the time. And like Julie said, she wrote me letters all throughout the years. In the beginning, multiple per year, and then kind of later on, it was one per year, but always on my birthday. And then when I was 17, my dad took me out, showed me the letters, and started reading through all of them to me. So at that time, it was incredible. It was learning all this stuff, but it was still almost a story. It was still just words on a page.
Mm.
So in meeting Julie, to me, that was kind of closing that chapter and starting something else, starting, I guess, a new journey, a new chapter.
It's good. It's really good. Julie, for you, when it was like we're going to reunite after 3 years, what was that like for you? And that processing, maybe the night before you were going to meet Jeremy.
It was really hard to process because when he was around, I would say maybe 19, 18 or 19, I had actually written to his parents asking a couple of questions that I just wanted to know the answer to. And one of them was whether he had come to Christ. I just wanted to know if he had, because he was relinquished to Christian parents. And when I received the answer to my questions and found out that he did know the Lord, it's almost like this weight was lifted, like, okay, I can let go of ever meeting him this side of heaven. You know,
Hmm.
if I know that he knows the Lord, then I'll spend eternity with him. So I was able to let that go a little bit. So when he did reach out, it floored me and I sobbed and sobbed just out of sheer joy. Like I couldn't believe that my dream had come true and that we were going to meet. And I was so nervous. So nervous. He tells me he wasn't nervous, but I was so nervous to meet him.
There wasn't as much build up for me.
Mhm.
So you met, and what was that like? And what is now the relationship like with the two of you? I mean, you both have families, and now you have, this special, birth connection. What is the story like now? Julie, why don't you want to start, or Jeremy? Me, Jeremy, you go ahead.
Um, it was so when we first met, um, we I didn't know how long we'd be talking or anything, but we ended up talking for 8 hours straight and just connecting on every single level. And at the end of it, like neither of us wanted to go, but we felt like we had to let the other person go out of respect for the families and your own personal time. Um, but like I don't know. Basically, like Julie's become my best friend. It's been really interesting, having the opportunity to meet my biological family, and realizing what a privilege it is to actually be surrounded by that.
Mhm.
And most people don't actually understand that privilege because they grow up with that. That's the norm. But there's a much different connection and different parts of you that are filled and complete by being around your biological family. That
Mhm.
can't happen otherwise.
Remy said a
Yeah.
word that I want to touch on. He said the word complete. And I think I would use that word after I met him, after those first 8 hours. I think I felt complete. And I didn't realize I didn't feel that way until the feeling came. And I was like, oh, like that's what this is supposed to feel like. I actually feel like I could die tomorrow and I reached everything. Like I don't know, I just felt complete, which is interesting. It was different. I didn't anticipate that at all.
Mhm.
The other thing that was interesting was I raised two boys of my own with my husband, and Remy is very much like both of those boys, but he's more like me specifically than the other two boys are, which is wild because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know.
Yeah. It's like that nature nurture. We always have that conversation in my home about nature nurture, where I have, especially being Filipino and my parents are white Caucasian Canadian. It's interesting that I actually have had quite an interesting nurture and have like quirks and idiosyncrasies like my mom and dad. And then obviously nature things of being Filipino comes out. And my parents are like, "We never taught you that. We don't even know what that is." And it's really much of like my own culture and sort of the DNA. So I love that's fascinating. I want to
Yeah.
ask this. Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry. Yeah. It was interesting for us because after we started to get to know each other, we started to notice bit by bit how similar we actually were, and not even just in our likes and dislikes and simple things like that, but really how our brain processes and spits out information. So we'd be talking in a group, and this would happen time and time again. Someone would say something, and at the exact same time, with the exact same intonation, with the exact same words, Julie and I would respond back to that.
Mm.
And then we just stare at each other and laugh.
That's good. I want to ask this in light of it, adoption and, Julie, for you, so important that, Jeremy knew Jesus, was in a home that knew him, followed him. What is for you sort of this connection of adoption and sort of, God's plan for us? Because I think there's something really connected into family and love and adoption and God. And I could go on and on and on about it because I love it. But I just know that there's something very sacred and wonderful about adoption within the context of our faith. Julie, what would you say to that?
I just always wanted him to know how loved he was. I never wanted him to question, if I was abandoning him or
Mm,
rejecting him, because that was the absolute furthest from the truth, because it was because of my love for him and how much I wanted him to feel accepted by his family and be loved by them. And I put a lot of thought into who I would choose for his parents. And it was not random. It was very purposeful, the choice that I made in his family, and just wanting him to have that connection, wanting him to be raised by Christians and to come to know the Lord. And I think it just speaks of God's heart for us too. Like he has adopted us, and so somebody who has been adopted probably grasps that even more, right,
mhm.
than those of us who haven't gone through an experience like that. But we all have been adopted. So it's just an incredible piece.
Mm.
Yeah.
Jeremy, I mean, you probably have done this, but what would you say to Julie, but also your adopted mom? And I say this because I always say this when I'm talking about my own adoption story, that I say I have to say something of thanks. What would you say to Julie? And what would you say to your adopted mom as far as the choices that they've made that you are here today?
Um,
And not to put you on the spot, but I am.
it's honestly like I am who I am through both of them, right? Like it's that combination of nature versus nurture that we were talking about. There's so much that I learned and got from my parents, but then finding out there's also so much that I got from Julie as well. So like if it weren't for either of them, I wouldn't be here today. So you kind of owe, or I kind of owe like who I am and everything to both of them.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Lynn Jeremy, for sharing. I think it's a beautiful picture of you together. Uh, it's a wonderful story of, reunion and being chosen and celebrating that. And I love, Jeremy, what you said, that, we are, sort of this product and influenced by our birth mother and our adopted mother. And I would say, the same every Mother's Day. I'm always thanking both of them because I'm here because of both of them. And so, isn't that amazing? We get this double portion of love from two moms. Like, come on, like that's an amazing thing. So, just want to say thank you so very much for coming on today, for sharing your story. So encouraged about your relationship, and really excited to see where Jeremy God is going to take you. And thank you, Julie, so much for your courage and love. So, thanks for being with us.